Welcome to That's a Hard No, the podcast about learning to say no and set boundaries to live our best lives. I'm your host, Heather Drago. You may think, because of this podcast, that I'm a boundary setting expert, but I'm not. I'm an expert at struggling to set boundaries. But you know what? I'm working on it, and it is getting easier. Follow along with me as I learn from fellow strugglers and experts so that you too can start saying no without feeling fear, guilt, or FOMO.
You don't know where to go. Unfriendly applications got you feeling low. You're not sure what to do. Weight of expectations is coming down on you. There's a phrase you should know. Tastes so much sweeter than hello. That's a hard no.
Did you know that by the year 2050, the number of people over the age of 60 is expected to reach 2.1 billion? We all know why. Healthcare is improving all the time, safety is getting safer, scarcity is getting scarcer, and thank God, who doesn't want to live in that world? Something that we aren't discussing enough when it comes to our increasing longevity, though, is that the older you get, the more likely you are to need additional help to get by. Half of people over the age of 80 need regular caregiving or family intervention, and that number reaches 79% by age 90. There's a pretty high likelihood that if your parent or grandparent does live a long, healthy life, you or a loved one are going to need to be part of it. But being a caretaker isn't just work, it's hard work. The kinds of tasks you need to perform can be really difficult, and the added layer of emotional rigor to the taking care of a loved one can be really intense. So what are we supposed to do? How do we set healthy boundaries with someone who relies on us to take care of them, and in a society that expects us to always put others first? Our guest today helps people become better equipped to tackle these hard issues. Kristi Horner is the founder and executive director of Courage to Caregivers. After losing a family member to suicide, she found that as his long-term caregiver, there had to be a better way to support mental illness caregivers. She established Courage to Caregivers as a nonprofit to meet that exact need. Kristi, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
I've been really excited to have this conversation with you because, like everyone, at some point in our lives, I've had to advocate for other people in the healthcare realm, or I've been a caregiver. And I always tell my kids, my now adult kids, that at some point, everyone in life needs help with something, right? So I think, so many of us end up becoming caregivers, and it can be for a variety of reasons: mental health, physical disability, aging parents, parents with children who are born with issues. Like, there's so many different kinds of situations and people who end up being caregivers. But it can look very different depending on the situation you're in. And I would say most times caregivers are not given the support they need or resources they need. So I guess I just want to start with that and tell us about your lived experience as a caregiver and common themes you hear from other people and the kinds of boundaries that need to get set.
Well, that's like a
A whole
three-part
lot
question.
of questions.
That's like
I
three-part
know.
question.
I do that to people. I'm sorry.
That's no problem. So I'll start with
wherever you want.
Right. I really thought of myself until 2010 as, probably just a daughter, then just a sister, then just a partner, and then just a mom. Really, I didn't
Just,
okay.
right?
Just, and I'm using those air quotes, which is really important because I really just saw that as part of my identity. All of those roles, all mixed in. And then my brother called. Just literally, I was driving to meet someone for coffee, and we knew he'd been managing some underlying severe mental illness. He then had a fairly routine surgery that you have probably known lots of people to have. It left him in chronic pain. He went all the way to the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic's like, yeah, nothing we can do for you. You're going to have to learn how to live in chronic pain. And that moment, he was no longer able to manage all the underlying anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder. And he called, he was living in suicidal ideation. And I was trained enough to know what to say in the moment, pulled over, had an honest, hard conversation. I knew the 3 questions to ask. He had already shared he was having plans to hurt himself. Do you have a plan? Yes, he did. I asked him to share the plan, and then I had to ask that hard question, do you have the means to execute that plan? No. So then I knew, okay, he's going to be okay. I don't need to call someone to get over there right away. I said, I can be there in a few hours, and can you hold on till I get there? Yes. He's like, just knowing you can be here is helpful. So in that moment, I was launched from just a sister to an unpaid family caregiver. Mm-hmm. Now, what most caregivers will say is, they reserve the term caregiver for those people that are paid to take care of mom and dad,
right,
in a place or at home. And so for all those reasons that I didn't necessarily identify as a caregiver until much later. But that's exactly what happened, because I immediately went from those sisterly type qualities to his primary emotional and mental health support system.
Yeah.
In every way. And it took us a while to get into the groove. My sisters were there, my parents impartially, but really had to find that place of what did he need and what could I provide? Because I immediately was going into, I wouldn't say fix mode, but that mode of
problem solver.
Right. Or just, I thought he was looking for advice. And so we had to get to that place because, again, this is a new boundary, new territory for us. And he was very clear. He had excellent boundaries in that moment, saying, what I really need, I don't need your advice. I don't need counseling. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Don't you need you to fix this or be a problem solver? All things that I might have experience in. I need you just to listen. Mm-hmm. I was like, I can do that too. Mm-hmm. So I always knew that every time he called, I'd make myself a cup of hot tea and I'd go sit in somewhere else where I could just be fully present for him. And it was all by phone, all virtual support at that time, for those 4 years. And then ultimately, he lost his battle with mental illness to suicide in 2014. Sorry. Thank you. And what I've come to know now is that no one wants to end their life. They want to end the pain. And he got to a point where he could no longer manage that pain. And so we, in our own grief, loss, healing journey to find hope again, as my sisters and I were coming through that together, very much together, we realized with such passion and conviction that no one should take this journey alone of providing support to someone they love. We lost a lot of friends during that time who just didn't know how to support us. We were probably really bad at asking for what we need. Again, good
probably
parts.
Didn't know.
Yes. And as part of our healing, just started telling our story as people came looking for advice from us. And I just kept saying there has to be a better way to care for caregivers. And so I was in my mid-50s not looking to start a nonprofit. I was hoping to put my energy somewhere else. And yet nobody was doing it in quite the same way that I had this vision for, or what I felt that I had needed and my sisters needed during that time. And so everyone's like, it sounds like a great idea. We think you should go for it. And so very reluctantly, I became a social entrepreneur. And we launched Courage to Caregivers to further then support other unpaid family caregivers, starting with caring for those living with mental illness. Mm-hmm. And now over 6 years have, thank you pandemic, launched us into a virtual national space as a national agency supporting caregivers of all kinds to prevent burnout.
I'm so happy to learn about your organization. Mm-hmm. I personally have someone in my family who struggles with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. And it's really hard to know what to say. And so, like, you and I will have an aside conversation. Absolutely. Because I could use that support.
No problem.
You know, and it's so scary. It's like low-level terror all the time, like worried what's going to happen.
Trauma.
Yeah, it is. It's very scary.
Caring for someone with an inconsistent illness of any kind is considered trauma. It's
traumatic. Yeah, for sure. I know that my mother-in-law struggled with early onset dementia for 12 years, and I was one of the many family members that helped take care of her. And it was a trauma. It was so difficult, and I think my father-in-law, who lost the love of his life through this whole process, like, I think he's still struggling with the trauma of it. Luckily, we did reach out to the Alzheimer's Association, and there were support groups and things like that that helped. But I think had we known about your organization, it might, or if you might not have been formed yet, I can see how you could be so helpful to people, because there really isn't a lot out there for these unpaid family caregivers, or whether or not they're family, but you know what I mean. Like,
Absolutely.
it's hard to know what to do. We're not trained professionals. We don't know all the things, and it's very scary.
Very scary. I think we put the needs of others always first, as we should. And so depending on where the person is in their level of understanding that they're now a unpaid family caregiver, we always start with psychoeducational programming. First, understand your loved one's diagnosis, go to the Alzheimer's Association, go to NAMI, take all their classes, get all the information, immerse yourself in this new journey. And then when you're ready to focus on you, once you get that first part, phase 1 under,
Immediate crisis control.
Yeah. Then you come and you're ready to say, now I'd like part of my own identity kind of back. And actually that is kind of a boundary, right? Where you're ready to say, the world has said this is selfish, that we should always put the needs of others, or especially those in immense need, like serious chronic illness, first. And I would agree, absolutely. But it's that oxygen mask mantra.
Yes.
You only have 12 seconds of useful consciousness. So if you're like my husband, who will listen to this one day, but he knows because I use this story all the time, he absolutely says, no, I will go and help my entire family and then everyone around me. Well, he will have gone 15 rows back to help people, perhaps in those 12 seconds. And then his max is way up there. He'll be passed out. He'll be able to help more people, or at least within the reach of that mask, in those 12 seconds, that if he doesn't put on his own oxygen mask first. Because if we don't take care of ourselves, we run the risk that you saw with your father-in-law, which was their own mental, physical health declines. And in some cases, we're seeing the caregivers are predeceasing their loved ones. And then what good are they?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So you have to take care of your own health and wellness. It's essential.
Yeah.
You provide better care that way, too.
Right. So, what are the kinds of boundaries other than, so you talked about the oxygen mask and you teach people to take care of themselves. What are the kinds of boundaries you teach people to make? Besides, I need sleep, I need rest, I need support. Like, what are the things?
Right. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up first, because those are basic human needs. So if you were to talk to a professional of any kind, they're going to say, look at hydration, proper nutrition, moving your body, and sleep. Those are your basic human needs that absolutely have to start there, and nothing should compromise those. Those are just absolutely essential for everyone doing anything on this planet.
Right.
And I would argue, if boundaries are feeling hard, check yourself. Like, notice, have I had something to drink in the last hour? Have I had a healthy snack, or am I, eating?
Am I hangry?
Right. Do I need a little rest? Do I need to give myself a little time out? Or do I need to get up and out of my head into my body, which is what happens when you start to move, that allows you to create healthier boundaries. So we actually just start with noticing.
Yeah.
Noticing what's feeling uncomfortable or wrong or something like that. We could talk about boundaries every week in our groups, or every week with our individual clients through family peer support, because they're struggling with these boundaries, or they feel like they're being taken advantage of and they're feeling resentful, like all the outcomes of not having healthy boundaries. I would say that, first of all, healthy boundaries are not something you're born with. It's having that true growth mindset that says creating healthy boundaries is a practice, and it takes a lifetime to achieve even healthier boundaries.
Preach,
but
sister.
you can learn. But you can learn how to do
totally.
this.
Yeah.
That's not
It
to
is
say
a practice.
right.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that it's a trajectory I'm going to get it perfect one day.
Right.
I'm actually going to fail or learn from you how to have better boundaries, or the next person, and say, I have something to learn every day I'm going to fail.
Yeah.
But I'll stand up again, and I'll learn from the mistake of this one and do it a little bit better or differently next time.
Yeah. I talk all the time about how when I started, you can go back and listen. My year of no in 2019, like it took me like 5 months to get really comfortable finding a no every day. And in the meantime, I hurt people's feelings. I messed up.
Right.
I made so many mistakes, and that's how you learn. You just, you don't learn how to be an expert skateboarder, the first time you go out. Like, you fall down
You do.
and you
But
get back up.
I think you bring up a really important point, though, which is also a huge part of that learning trajectory in your year of no, is that we have to learn to let go of guilt, shame, and we have to learn self-forgiveness
Yes.
and self-compassion.
Yeah.
And who would have guessed that self-compassion, self-forgiveness are all wound up into healthy boundary setting? But if you hadn't learned how to forgive yourself for those things
Yeah.
as you were practicing your
Yeah.
no's,
Yeah.
those are all really hard things to do as a caregiver, as for any human.
Yeah. So I want to touch on a topic that I hear about in my world all the time. It just seems to me like the women in families are the ones this falls upon the most, and that the daughters, the sisters, the moms, whatever, it falls on them. And if it's a single woman in particular, it's like, well, you have nothing else going on in your life. You should be able to handle it. And I think in our society, we train women to be people pleasers and caretakers, and you described yourself as a human based on the roles you had in relationship to other people, rather than I'm an artist, I'm a this, I'm a that, whatever, right? And I think we're all trained that way, and I think that's why women in particular seem to really, really struggle with boundaries. So I would love to talk with you about the guilt that happens in families, foisting caretaking duties on the women in the family, like what you see and how you help those women have healthier boundaries around it, help to share caretaking duties with the rest of the family. What do you know about that?
Well, and in general, I would say you're absolutely right. We happen to see a handful of men, as well as non-binary folks in our community of participants, and it's really beautiful to hear from those men in groups, especially because they can really support each other with some of those typical gender identities.
Yeah.
When they really feel stigmatized in the community. My husband's actually a very strong male caregiver to many different relationships of care in his life. We actually support a young adult son who has a traumatic brain injury after a motorcycle accident.
Oh, wow.
And has come back and living at home. Now he's driving and working, but requires a lot of support due to his vulnerability and his frontal lobe permanent brain damage. But my husband not only supports him and actually left his work full time to take on that role since I was running our
Good for him.
nonprofit, right? He should have taken FMLA, but he did not. And then I think he likes retirement too. But and then he cares for an aunt with developmental disabilities her whole life, and is now I'd say he's her primary mental and emotional caregiver, and he's with his two siblings supports his mom with early stage Alzheimer's and living out of town, and so he definitely plays that role, but in a really beautiful way. And I think he actually has way better boundaries than I in many caregiving regards. I think women take on that role for many reasons. First of all, some would say it's that we're kind of hardwired to be compassionate, empathetic, and actually like empath overload in many cases. And so it's a natural thing. And many men, they may not have some of those soft skills yet. I mean, I believe they can all pursue them. I think that traditionally, and the people in my generation especially, women were we were making less in our careers, so we were the ones to take on the primary parenting responsibilities or caregiving responsibilities as our parents have aged or other relationships. And so it was more affordable for someone like me to step out of the workforce than my husband, who was in a bigger corporate job and making more from the beginning of our careers. I think that's becoming more even playing field. So I think you're seeing more and more of that. But part of it is soft skills. Part of it is salary and just the costs. And until we can get some of this legislation passed where caregivers can be paid for those duties in the home. And I'm not just talking about parenting. I'm talking about caring for parents. I'm talking about caring for anyone with disabilities or serious chronic illness of any kind. That's a win-win for,
Everybody.
right, all things. And then
I think there are also like traditional like norms in certain cultures, in certain families, like it's expected of the women to take on those duties, whether or not that's the track they want to be on.
Absolutely. And some of it is, I can do it better.
Yeah.
I'm using air quotes because, there's this perception that I can or I should be able to do it better because that's what society expects of me. And so therefore, this is what I'm supposed to do. So we hear a lot of people saying, oh, I don't identify as a caregiver. I am just doing what I am supposed to do.
My duty.
It's a duty and responsibility. My parents raised me, therefore I shall raise them. I mean, it's an expectation. So I'm not a caregiver. I am literally just doing what I'm supposed to do. And so there's that. I think that you mentioned guilt, and I put guilt and shame in the same bucket. Mm-hmm. If there's anything I learned coming out of my mom's story of addiction when I was in a young adulthood, and sober for decades now, and went on to become a chemical dependency counselor, was guilt is a self-imposed emotion. You can't make someone else feel guilty. So if we look at guilt as coming from within, then, and shame, and the partnership between guilt and shame, and looking at my favorite shame researcher, Brene Brown, how do we then learn to let go within the boundary setting of the guilt? If that guilt comes from me, not you didn't bring that on, then how do I manage that? How do I manage the letting go of guilt? That is being more self-compassionate. That's back to the self-forgiveness. And honestly, it's, I used to say let it go for anything really big and hard. And now I've reframed that to let it be, because it feels more gentle and genuine to myself. Letting go makes it sound like I can just be like, oh, voila, it's done. It's out of my mind. I've let that go. Mm-hmm. It's over. And no. For me, that's just impossible. Mm-hmm. I just can't let it go. But when I say let it be, and I reframe it as let it be, like let it just kind of be, everything becomes more manageable.
Yeah. Yeah. Me. I want to clarify a little bit when you say other people can't make you feel guilty. They can try, for sure. They can try, but you have to let them in. You have to take that in and adopt that yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? Am I
right? I saw your questioning face when I said that. Again, learned it in addiction treatment from a professional.
No, I totally get what you're saying, but I just want to share with everyone, like people, you may think it's them trying, but like you have to accept what they're saying.
Well, and I think we learned it during this family week where people were saying, you've got to stop making me feel guilty about X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And someone had to clarify and say, I can't make you feel guilty. You feel like we own our own feelings and emotions. Guilt is that, and then this concept of guilt or the construct of guilt then becomes, you could try, but guilt is how I might feel in response to something that you did or said.
Right.
So I've always reframed it then and said, I own my own feelings and emotions.
That's right.
And a feeling and emotion only lasts 90 seconds in your body. So if I can just make it through 90 seconds.
With it. Yeah. Yeah.
Turn my back, take a deep breath, give it a minute plus 30. I can get through it. Sometimes that's really hard to remember when you're met with, anger. But what's in my control is not your emotions, but what's in control is how I respond to you in your emotional state.
That's very good advice.
Well,
It echoes a lot of what we talk about on this podcast a lot. So you're right in line with
I'm
what
glad we can
think.
all agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, on that happy note, we'll be back in just a minute. That's a Hard No is brought to you by Clever Girl Marketing, my full-service agency specializing in smart, strategic marketing solutions for businesses and nonprofits. Okay, so you're probably wondering, Heather, what's with the podcast about boundaries? Why not marketing? Well, maybe in the future, but for now, it actually does relate, so bear with me here. Smart marketing, strategic marketing, requires knowing what to say no to and why. Businesses and nonprofits get inundated with marketing options and offers every day. We help you cut through all that noise, focus on your specific needs, and develop actionable strategies that are doable and actually make sense. Whether it's websites, SEO, email, social, or traditional channels, we're experienced in all of it. So if you need help figuring out your marketing, visit our website, clevergrowmarketing.com, and get in touch. Often our families are not perfect. Often there are unhealthy family dynamics. There are broken relationships. Not always, but sometimes. And someone might find themselves in a caretaking position with someone that maybe traumatized them in their youth, or they have a bad relationship. I can see how that could be very, very tough. I know that in one of my relationships, I often am in the caretaking role, and I find I'm having to kind of go, okay, Grace, just take a breath, just let it go in and don't react, just be calm, let it go, let it be. What advice do you have for people who are in kind of that tricky situation where they find themselves as a caretaker, they don't necessarily get along real well with that person? There's some boundary setting that needs to happen there.
Yeah.
What do you say about that?
Well, I have a lot to say only because I may
good.
know a thing or two about that. I may be one of those people, without divulging too much,
Right.
but that carefully. I will say that we see a lot of caregivers, a lot of our participants are exactly in that position. We have participants of all kinds, so it becomes really hard in a group where we've got someone who holds someone with a lot of love and tenderness and it's just beloved relationships. And so that becomes very heavy and hard. And then we have the relationships you've described, which become very challenging. And yet we can hold space for each other.
Sure.
I am so respectful of those who do have those tender, caring relationships. Many of mine are fractured and difficult. And I think that for me, the way I look at those challenging relationships of care is just, and it took me, this is not something I learned overnight or just happened. It took me years of work to say the capacity of Kristi is finite. Now, my mindset is infinite.
My love may be infinite.
My love is complicated, but can be infinite. My positivity, my hope, my all of these things, infinite in my mindset. I have a very strong growth mindset, so I'm constantly learning from people. But my capacity is finite. So if we look at the capacity of Kristi, and I will say this to people I care for, the capacity for Kristi is here. Therefore, what you are asking for me, and let's just say you get a wedge and you get a wedge and you get a wedge, or whatever portion of my capacity, and that ebbs and flows from day to day, from week to week. But if you're asking for me more than I have to give, that's where I find that boundary, really being able to say, so you may need this week. That's outside of my capacity. I just don't have that to give. Yet, this is where the growth mindset comes in. I can offer this, but I can't offer all of me because there's all of me not to give. I just don't have that. So I have to look at my capacity. I have to be really clear about what are they asking of me? What do they need from me? And if it's outside that. We've come to a really hard place. My dad has lived with us for 17 years. And I've now been caring for him longer than he cared for me. And many would say it's an honor and privilege to care for our parents who once cared for us. If you've ever had a, childhood trauma story, that becomes complicated in that. And his needs have grown beyond what I can do for him.
Right.
And it's actually, the emotional trauma now is when's he going to fall again in my home?
Yes.
It's absolutely terrifying.
Yes.
So that living in fear for being gone for longer than XYZ, I had to come up with a plan in the interim until we could figure out what's next for him. And we found this really great resource where we have video monitoring, and I have friends who are video monitoring their dogs at doggy daycare or while they're away. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to watch. So we found a company that could do the video monitoring and be the person watching and let me know if there's an emergency so that I can go away for longer than a few hours from my home. So looking at what is within my sphere of capacity, what their needs are. If it's really hard emotionally, and I've had family members who've said, I just can't do any more than what I'm doing now because it's just too hard.
And that's fair.
Completely
it is not
fair. Completely
that does
fair.
not make you a failure or
Not in the least.
Yeah,
No.
it's
So then we have to come together
yeah.
and say, manage that resentment of the burden of responsibility that still
Yeah.
comes with that.
yeah.
But we work on that together, and we're still working on that together in support of parents, and just saying, oh, this has been enough. I have two sisters. We care for two parents. They're divorced, and looking at, we each play a different role for our parents in their support. And when we look at those different roles, being really clear in our communication. Our parents are neurotypical. We're very fortunate. So we're able to have those conversations which say, this is my role. And each of us have different capacity and ability to support them. Very different for each of them. And being okay with that. And being in communication about that. And not letting myself compare myself to the sister who can call every day.
Right.
So I shouldn't take on that feeling less than because she's able to do that, but just acknowledging and saying it out loud, Mom, this is what I can give you, but this is what sis can give you and what it looks like and how it's different. So we each play a very different supportive role. And it's more communicating with myself, with them, and then also with the person we're caring for. Of course, I would always say, and this is where we talked a little bit before we started about, as a certified family peer supporter, I am certified and credentialed to support someone with my lived experience, another caregiver. And yet I know where my lane is, that professional boundary that says, ooh, if you start to share your childhood trauma story with me, that is making this very challenging caregiving situation difficult for you, I'm going to make sure that you're talking to your therapist about that.
Right.
Because myself,
they have the skill set.
They have the skill set to talk about childhood trauma and helping you unpack that childhood trauma. Because that's very important when you're caring for anyone else, that you are managing your own. And I can see that as the outsider. And they may not even recognize that their own childhood story was traumatic, let alone it is trauma that requires a professional to deal with.
Right.
But then I over here as the family peer supporter then can say, okay, and I can support you over here. The boundaries, the being okay with letting go. I don't often say, let's practice saying no. We do talk about that, but I often say, let's practice saying your best yes, because it feels a little bit better as a caregiver. Because then you're not saying no all the time. What's our best yes in this moment? What that you can own. And then looking at what's in our control and out of our control.
That's such an interesting concept. The best yes. What is your best yes?
Yeah. There's a book about that. It's not a Kristi concept.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll find that and we'll put it on our.
Yeah, it's
on
a
our
really
show
good one.
notes.
It's she's a spiritual faith-based leader. And so I read it very early in my spiritual practice. And so what really resonated is it's the reframing. I just like the sound of the best yes.
Because no can be scary.
Yeah, or hard.
Or hard. Yeah, I mean,
or you can feel bad about it. It
Yeah.
can impose guilt on yourself.
Yeah, but if you focus on what is the best yes,
It's
then
for you.
what do you have to say no to get that best yes? Right. It just follows naturally.
Absolutely.
Right. I'm thinking about, again, going back to my in-laws. It was I am so blessed. I have the world's greatest mother-in-law.
So great.
I loved her, literally the most incredible woman, and my father-in-law as well, just the best. And they had such a loving relationship, and it was so hard for him to let go of caregiving duties when it came to the point where it wasn't safe for her to be home, right?
Right.
And so I'd love to talk about that a little bit, about setting boundary with yourself of like, I'm not the right person to do this anymore, right?
Yeah. It's so hard to see it in yourself, I think.
Yeah.
I just saw that with my mom and her husband. And she cared for him for many years. And no matter how we or when or what we said, she was going to take care of him. I think at some point it becomes unsafe. So you have to have that self-awareness. In the moments of crisis, self-awareness starts to go out the door.
Oh, yeah. You're just surviving.
You do.
You're just
So,
treading water.
so here's what I said to my mom as she was making some really hard decisions about her husband, who was living with dementia and 98, recovering from a broken hip and so many other things. First of all, we should always do with our parents, give them as much power and control that they can, because so much is out of their power. They've lost so much independence. They've lost so much power and control over time, and they're really struggling to hold on to what they can. So I realized that with her, and I said, wanting to give her this power and control, I didn't want to be the problem solver, because then she could come back and resent me. I needed these to be her decisions. I needed her to have the self-awareness to see that she could no longer care for him at home. And she started to see that very quickly. I can't do this. And so I just asked one question. I said, when it was your mom, because my grandfather had Alzheimer's, and it was when she is an only child. When it was your mom, what questions did you ask her to help her make the best decision in the moment, to see what was needed? What questions did you ask her? And she just smiled, this little sly smile, and she looked at me and she said, well, I didn't. I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, I just told her, you can no longer take care of Daddy. It's time. And then we moved him. And I was like, wow, okay. I said, well, I'm not going to do that, Mom, because I don't want you to be resentful, and I want you to own this decision. I want you to feel good about this decision. But I also understand that decision fatigue's real when you're facing all these medical issues and concerns.
It's overwhelming.
It is, and you don't want to be the person to, who's made this big, hard decision. I said, actually, I think you should be talking to your husband's daughter, who's very much a part, one of my bonus sisters, a part of this. I think you should be talking.
Bonus sister. That's so good.
I said, I think you should be talking to her about this. I said, I'm here to support you, and I will support you no matter what that looks like. But I need you to have this awareness and understanding so that you can make that decision. And then I have to, if I'm willing to do that, I then have to be willing to let it be.
Live with whatever that is. Yeah.
Because it may not be my decision, but
right.
they, so that's what I would say in that situation of letting them have as much power and control as they can within the realms of staying safe. Although I said our job is to keep you safe, and they fought on many things, and I had to walk away and let it be at some point.
Yeah.
So it's really, really hard.
Yeah. Let's touch on that decision fatigue.
Yes.
And I just know in different situations we've had through my cancer journey, all the things, it is overwhelming, the amount of information you get, different opinions about what the right thing to do is, different options. Doctors are like, well, here are your choices. You can do these things. And you're like, well, what would you do? And they're like, well, we can't tell you what you should do. You should, and it's so overwhelming. It's so exhausting. I would love to hear maybe some pointers, tips, I don't know, just your thoughts on how to help people navigate through that. We've talked about, taking care of your physical needs and all that stuff. But what are some tips for navigating kind of the information overload?
Yeah, I think, and I wish I had the secret sauce there. I think it's one of the attributors to caregiver burnout, which we would like to think we're in the burnout prevention business, but solidly we're in the burnout crisis management business here. I think it can lead to that very quickly. It begins with compassion fatigue, which just essentially caring too much.
Yeah.
And then through that, all the information that we have, it can be too much. Usually it's a get out of your head and into your body. So it comes back to those. things. It comes back to hydration, food, movement, sleep. It's when we sit there and we're go, more, information, read. And it starts to swim and we're just, I can't take in anymore. It's literally getting out of our head. So mindfulness is also another really great way. I didn't know anything about breathing and meditation. And as you look at the role trauma has on your body, and that's trauma that you're speaking of.
Absolutely.
And the role trauma has on your body, that understanding that, noticing when it's starting to take an effect, and literally stepping away. When part of our brain says step in.
Yes.
Do
Do
more.
more.
Just one more thing, one more opinion, one more this. But being able to step back and take a really long walk, or a run, or a yoga class, or
go
just
sit
be
at the
still.
beach and just breathe the air.
Oh, looking at a body of water.
Yes.
As the latest study says, is even better than being in nature. Pet therapy.
Yes.
Doodle. Write in your journal.
Knit.
It gets you, again,
Crochet.
gets your brain to stop, gets you out of your brain, into your body,
Right.
and gets any piece of your body moving. Literally, as you get up and out and start to even just walk, your brain starts to slow down.
Yeah.
So you don't get to overthink things, because we're really good at overthinking, because it's this need to control,
Yeah.
which all of this is out of our control.
Right.
So this need to control really takes over, and then the trauma. I also think there's this concept of, it goes back to that self-care is selfish, so that if we are needing to take care of ourselves because this all feels too much, that's selfish. I should be here. I shouldn't take a break. When my son was in the hospital for better part of 4 months, and you're living in the hospital, the first 28 days in the trauma ICU, you're thinking, I can't leave because something might happen.
Yep.
Catastrophic.
Yep. Been there.
Your mom body brain says stay, and yet I knew I couldn't sleep at the hospital.
Yeah.
I just couldn't. My husband did. I couldn't.
No.
It's like,
yeah.
to be the best
can't
version of
function.
myself, I have to go home and sleep.
Yeah.
And just having that awareness and being okay with that. And I needed to tell my husband, you please do not judge me for this. I'm a better person. I'm a better mom and a better wife and a better daughter and sister if I can do this for myself.
Yeah.
So that's just a boundary.
Yeah.
And then advocating for myself, please don't judge me.
Yeah, absolutely. I talk about this a lot. Way back when I saw a social post, I don't know who wrote it. I wish I could credit you. It's something that changed my life. And it basically was like just a friendly reminder that rest is not earned. Rest is part of being a human being. And so and then I said, thank you, that is all. And I've thought about that post every day, because there are times where no matter how hard I work, no matter how much I'm caring for someone, no matter what, there comes a point where I used to say, I need to do that one more thing. I need to go send that last email. I gotta go make sure this is happening. Whatever the thing was, right? Whether it was work related or family related. And I've gotten to a point now where like, no, I don't have to do the one more thing. I don't need to earn the right to go to sleep, or earn the right to eat something or drink something or go for a walk. Like, we are humans. We still need to take care of ourselves, even if we're taking care of other people.
No. And it really starts with noticing. What does your body need?
Yeah.
Where are you holding stress right now? What is a stressor? It's just noticing and being more self-aware. And we become more self-aware when we take care of ourselves.
Yes.
It's Katie Reed, actually, who said, for me, the self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you.
I love that. Yeah, that's good. I love it. So tell us more about how people can find you, what kind of help you offer, and also any other resources you might recommend for people.
Right. So someone who just is a lifelong learner, I'm constantly reading books and looking for more resources. I saw you reading one we really like. I saw that. So, and she's our new favorite. But so we do have a website, couragetocaregivers.org. We support caregivers throughout the U.S. and Canada. Our insurance limits that. Everything we do is virtual, so it's a beautiful way to meet people throughout the country in every time zone. We offer individual and group support for unpaid family caregivers of all kinds. Someone will say, well, do I qualify? If you're asking that question and if you're in need of support, we're here to help you. We don't check credentials at the door. We do measure the impact of our programs, and by that, we would find out what you are currently facing and what your challenges are and goals. We also look at, your care recipient and what their challenges are, but we're here for you, the caregiver, in whatever feels like a challenge. We do individual, informal, meaning we have a bank of volunteers with lived experience ready to support a caregiver in need.
Nice.
We have certified family peer supporters like myself ready and available to, within our credential, to support individual caregivers. And we run 4 different groups.
Okay.
So 4. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, Wednesday mornings. And some are led by licensed social workers, and some are led by certified family peers, again, like myself. We consider them group coaching more than support groups because group coaching feels to me like we're moving towards personal growth and healing.
Coaching is about moving forward.
That's how I look. It's about that empowerment piece, and many support groups is a great place to come and vent, but we're not vent sessions. We're looking at our own, what's in our control, not looking to our loved ones' challenges. So every week we have a curriculum. Every week is a different topic. So this week's topic, for instance, was motivation versus self-discipline and the difference, and how do we use those within the construct of caregiving and caring for our loved ones. And so we unpack that together and use examples of what's hard and what's not as we work to support each other in those environments.
Wow.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's our primary work, and they can just register or they can call. They can reach out via the website. On the website is also one of our favorite tools are these caregiver information resource sheets, where we have a sheet for all the major diagnoses that we see coming our way and how to support those with our favorite resources, as well as one on boundaries. So there's a great one there on boundaries. So they can download that. And we also help advocate for caregivers to help them advocate for themselves at work. So we do
that's really important.
Professional presentations at work. We do it for corporations. We do it as part of EAPs. We do it in other professional caregiver support areas for other agencies as we partner with them to support their professional caregivers as well.
Fantastic. Well, you're doing amazing work, and I can so appreciate it. I know I'm going to ask you some questions offline.
No problem.
And I hope everybody, if you are in the situation like some of the ones we've talked about, like, please do look up Kristi's organization, Courage to Caregivers, and take advantage of the help that's out there. Like, you don't need to be alone.
No.
You don't need to take it all on your shoulders.
No. We're here to support you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for asking me.
That's a Hard No is a production of Clever Girl Marketing, my little agency in Cleveland, in partnership with our friends at Evergreen Podcasts. Many thanks to our amazing team, including Maura Del Rosario, our production and marketing coordinator, Noah Fouts, our amazing producer, editor, and composer who wrote our theme music and performed it with his band, The Big Leagues, and our new video producer and editor, Kay Holmberg. You can find show notes and resources on our website, and you can find other fun stuff on our socials. We're Hard No Podcast. Find your no, then say it with me.